Caring in a Carefree World. A week of colic, caretaking, and unexpected grace. Sometimes the problem is that we're trying too hard. Carl Phillips. Last week I posted the third installment of my Regathering series, leading you through a morning of feeding the horses and cleaning stalls. I had so much more to say about how hands-on work can recenter us and lead us through and into the transmutation of grief. But I was too busy working to write or to be conscious of how much I was grieving. I want to remedy that this week. We don't do anything by halves at this farm. If we explore a concept, the horses and the humans are all in. The atmosphere has not failed to deliver. I joke about how the universe has to bash me over the head with a concept before I stop what I'm doing and listen. And the universe has, like the time my mother threatened a drunk, massive ex-monk in the parking lot with her baseball bat. The universe has grabbed me by the shoulders and forced me to listen. I brought my father home to live with my mother, Christopher, and me at the farm. Sometimes I look back at the girl whose husband had just left her in Istanbul, the one who drove through her derelict childhood neighborhood the day after she landed back in the U.S., how I wept through the homesickness of a failed escape. The strip malls and the pawn shops and the water-stained burger restaurants made me cringe from the responsibilities of my family. I wanted to be somewhere, anywhere, where I could pretend that I was not me. I truly believed that enough good jewelry and fancy perfumes could mask the scent of terror I had inherited in my bones. The barn saved me then, and it saves me now. Back then, I crawled out of bed and fed the horses. I sweated my grief out by cleaning stalls. The buffer of sleep deprivation I acquired from tending to sick animals softened the blow of my life. Bit by bit and muscle by muscle, the horses worked the fear and regret out of me, taking my hope for something different and forcing me back into the now. In the present, the horses said, I could learn to create a life I didn't want to run away from. Responsibility filed away the addiction of my dreams and wishes. When the fantasies were dwindled into ghosts, I discovered something even better. I found my way back to myself. And the work is doing that again for me now. Before bringing Dad home from a nursing home to live with me at the farm, I was at a loss as to what I should do next for him. We had been distant for a decade and had come to an unspoken agreement that I would manage his affairs while nearby family would see to his daily needs. But a series of falls and medical crises landed him in a loop of hospital, rehab, and skilled nursing care starting last Thanksgiving. During that time, while he was in a vulnerable state, the facility moved forward with enrolling him in long-term care, despite my legal power of attorney and without notifying me or returning my calls. The financial setup in place would have allowed them to begin collecting his Social Security benefits and steadily draw down his assets to cover care. While it's true that Medicaid will not seize a person's home during their lifetime, medical debt is often recouped through estate recovery, meaning the property can be claimed in probate after death. This isn't my first estate rodeo, but I only learned this detail about Medicaid when I recently consulted with an attorney. My father's house and land have been in his family for generations. It's important to him that the land stays with his descendants and isn't sold off to pay down institutional debt. Can we take a minute to talk about healthcare reform in the U.S.? My grandfather raised me, and he was a Republican politician. I've written about this before. However, he and I traveled outside the country to obtain health care for my grandmother. And when my grandfather passed from bone cancer, his treatment made a substantial dent in his estate. We can do better in the greatest country on earth. As I began to understand how the system had operated in my father's situation, we had to make quick choices. His medical team was starting to mention the H word, hospice. And a dear friend of mine, a longtime volunteer at the farm, helped me understand what hospice truly is and how misunderstood it often remains. The more I looked into it, the clearer it became. Most people wait too long. I asked my father if he would be interested in moving into the farm with me and my mom and Christopher. "Your mother's okay with this?" he asked. They've been divorced for 40 years. My mother was disowned by her own family for separating from my father. There are novels of animosity between them. But my mother is an empath at heart. She cannot stand to see needless suffering, even if she'll cross your nonsense with a bat. Her compassion is usually applied to animals and not humans, but in my father's case, her resentment fled in the face of his illness. I've cauterized bleeding tumors on horses. I've watched surgeries performed in the field. I have stuck my fingers or hands into every orifice in an animal. I've been smeared in poop and I have captured urine. But human fluids freak me the freak out. I got into my head a little too much the week before my father came to live with us. In light of everything happening, I hyperfixated on being mentally unable to clean him up if needed. I interviewed caregivers, imagined worst-case scenarios, delegated hard tasks to my mother and Christopher, and decided I was incapable of nurturing, etc. But once Dad was settled in a hospital bed in the guest room of the farmhouse, once we launched into new routine, my body went to work independently from my head. There are tasks that I do not even want to think about, but I do them. I've shocked myself with my ability to provide care that seemed impossible to me in theory. The horses prepared me for this. It's a running joke in our well-developed farm gallows humor that Sarah is always the one holding the horse that will reflux when the vet uses a tube to rehydrate a colic case. Without planning, my phone will ring or someone will ask me a question and I will turn away at just the right moment. But days after my father arrived to live with us, Lady the pony began to colic. I told the vet about how I run when the tube is first inserted. A group of students and instructors gathered in the back of the barn to watch the vet work on Lady. The day was dripping hot and everyone was feeling the unreasonableness of the end of summer. Schedules not lining up, a mad dash into change. I was stretched too thin, running like a flight attendant from one need to the next, my fingernails broken under the tabs of endless soda cans, filling ice, tying trash bags, smiling in the face of one more ask. "Do you have any Coke?" the vet asked. Coke. "I want to put some in Lady's tube to break up the fiber mat in her gut," the vet said. I ran up the hill, grabbed some cans, and checked in on my father. I ran back down the hill and fumbled with the tab. "I can't stand watching the reflux," I said. "You don't have to watch," the vet said. "Not because it's gross," I said, "but when I see it, I feel like I have to make hard decisions." And it's true, when a horse refluxes, it's usually a moment when I have to decide if we keep treating the animal or if it's time to ease them into death. In a lot of ways, the farm is a hospice for older horses. With the age of our population, it's strange that we don't have to make hard decisions very often. And that's a testament to the amazing crew we have caring for the horses every day. The vet siphoned the Coke into Lady, using it along with water and mineral oil to clear out the undigested hay in her belly. Lady is close to 30 years old, and her teeth can't grind roughage like they used to. Unlike Blackjack, another 3-decade black pony, who rolls his hay around in little wads that he spits out and keeps going. We give him token hay. Trish calls it his hay bouquet. The vet finished up and the crowd dispersed. I had one more session, a quiet one filled with the sound of evening bird song, to finish before I walked back up the house and cared for my father. I take the night watch when we have a sick horse. For a long time, I was incredibly resentful of being all the horse's primary caregiver. I would grasp on to the closest person who could help me run a farm, whether their able body came with a suitcase of abusive ghosts or a penchant for getting out of work entirely. A person's presence was better than nothing. Or so I thought. It took me a few decades, I'm a slow learner, to understand that I was still left alone with the night checks and the death watches, but with the added responsibility of carrying someone else's emotions. A sick animal or an ailing human works wonders towards shedding light on how much a person has invested in growth and maturity. The bubble would burst, and I would be left holding a fistful of rank water. Armed with the lived experience of animal husbandry, I was still uncertain about my ability to care for my bedbound father. But I knew that my mother had done a lot of work on herself and that my husband was born with the patience of a saint. Between us, I wouldn't have to do everything myself. "I love you," my mother said as I walked out the door the week before Dad arrived. I was slack-jawed for a moment, but eventually accepted her words for the gift they were and reciprocated. "Mom just said she loved me," I said, passing Christopher on the porch. "Maybe you should buy a lottery ticket," he said. And I haven't had to. It's usually me who wins the lottery of having to change Dad and mess up the salt ratios on his fries as I keep track of his meds and assemble his dinner. But I'm not alone. As Lady spun into deeper colic symptoms, I looked at the crowd of people watching the vet tube her, and I realized I'm not alone. At least once a month throughout the summer, sometimes more, Tamar, Reno, and I got together for snacks and a Coke. I craved our rituals of deep conversation over food and sweet treats. Our topics ranged from the serious to the absurd. Sometimes we talked about death and caregiving. Other times we talked about horses or books or something unhinged we read on the internet. The rhythm of it mattered more than the content. We'd meet in the house around the old farm table, grazing from whatever we'd thrown together. Between us, glasses of icy Coke snapped in the humidity. The horses would be tucked in, the sun would be setting through the kitchen window, and for a little while, the weight we both carry would lift. But we don't get to do that now. Summer's over. Her grandson has come to live with her just as my father has come to live with me. Our rituals have been replaced by grocery lists, appointments, school supplies, and medication charts. The moments around the table have scattered like feed pellets across a barn aisle. There, but hard to gather. We text when we can, we send each other memes, we promise we'll find time again soon. But we both know what season we're in. This is the part where care takes the lead. And the sweetness, when it comes, will have to be found in other ways. Stable Roots is where I share stories about horses, resilience, and the life I've built from both. I write weekly about connection, healing, and the messy, beautiful business of showing up. You can subscribe for free and follow along. But a paid subscription goes even further by directly supporting the farm, the horses, and the work we do here every day. However you choose to be a part of this community, I'm just grateful that you're here. I've written this week's post in between tasks. A section here, a section there, some notes scribbled into my phone. I planned to spend the afternoon giving my full attention to writing, but just as I sat down, word came from the barn that Lady was lying down again. I prepared a syringe of Banamine, the frontline drug that all barns keep on hand for colic symptoms, and I grabbed a 6-pack of Coke. I marched down the hill and I barked at everyone to leave me alone as they came with questions or comments on what was happening, and I found Lady lying peacefully in her stall, a fresh pile of poop in the clean shavings beside her. We'd taken turns grazing her all morning on the rich green grass that grows tall beside the wash stalls, all the trickling water from the hose drenching the roots. Lady hated me sticking a dosing syringe in her mouth, but she gulped the Coke as I plunged it in, all sticky and foamy in my hands. When I got down to the last drop in the bottle, I turned it back and I siphoned the dregs into my mouth. The pony and I savored the sweetness together. "No off-brand store cola for this girl," Michelle said, holding Lady still with the lead rope. We laughed about how Lady's wide, temperamental mouth hadn't spilled an ounce onto the ground. She was resentfully drinking every drop. Afterward, I walked into the house and my father summoned me to refill his own soda, cold from the refrigerator. I stuck a bendy straw into the opening like a periscope into the unseen. Here we are. I don't know if this is Lady's last days on this earth. I don't know how long my father will be with us. We don't know what comes after, or what is before. The only thing we know for certain is death, the beautiful woman, Jen, the Sunday morning volunteer, said as we caught up on my father, and I thanked her over and over for making it possible to bring him to the farm for hospice. So how do we drink deep of the sweetness while we're all still here together? I don't have a clean answer to that question, and maybe I don't need one. What I do know is that when everything feels like too much, the work still gets done. The horses are fed and the water buckets are filled. The Coke still flows, sticky and holy, from bottle to pony to friend to father to daughter, and the sweetness finds us despite the hurt. I never wanted to be the person to do any of this. I never wanted to be the one mixing meds into applesauce or setting timers for syringes. I never wanted to be the one ordering adult diapers in bulk or learning how to lift dead weight without cranking an already injured back. I didn't dream of giving hospice care in the same house where I run a business, where the accounting is never done and the feed room always needs raking. I didn't want this version of caregiving where the boundary between work and life no longer exists, where I rinse manure off my boots just to go back inside and take someone's blood pressure. But it turns out that life doesn't wait for our preferences. Neither does grief or the horses. The horses still need feeding. Their bodies speak to me in gestures. Lady penning her ears before her gut spasms, Max resting one hind leg more than the other on rainy days. Humans don't get to opt out, and strangely, that's grace. Because the more I move through the routines, the more my resistance falls away. There is rhythm in this work, in cleaning the stalls, scrubbing the buckets, and the grain pans thudding into place. The beat of it syncs up with my heart and reminds me that I'm not doing this alone. I never have been. I never wanted to be the one to do any of this, but the horses, as always, keep showing me that there is redemption in having no other choice. One step at a time, we'll see this through. And that alone is enough. Love, Kim.